Good morning. It is still morning, just barely still morning. So good morning, everyone. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm the programmer for TIFF Industry. And thank you for joining us for our lightning talks. A little bit about these types of sessions. This is the first time that we are scheduling this format for the industry conference. And the idea behind it is that we will have short presentations within each of the lightning talks, and you'll see on your schedules when the lightning talks are. And each of them will be connected by a programmatic thread, but talking about a larger, broader scheme, and giving you a tidbit of what's happening in other parts of the financing world. We were joking backstage that this is industry's version of the short program, so you can get you'll get a little preview of different things that are happening all over the world. I would like to introduce our moderator to join us on stage, who will outline how the session will work. Please help me welcome Wendy Mitchell, the editor at Screen International.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Wendy Mitchell from Screen International, and I'm not going to be talking much because I love this format. We're sort of going to go around the world in 30 minutes, and I think you're going to hear some really great in-depth sort of bursts of information about fascinating developments in finance and production and distribution around the world. And I'm just going to let us get started. I think we'll start with Rob Carney from Film Nation, who's based in New York, and he's going to actually talk about China for us. So, Rob, take it away.
Okay. These are lightning rounds, so we're just going to start going quickly. So my session is called Beijing Box Office Boom, which is alliterative and nice, but really we're talking about the Chinese box office growth. And what's the big deal about it is that it's recently surpassed Japan as the #2 box office market in the entire world. And analysts are predicting it's going to overtake North America in the near future. So that's all very exciting, but what I thought I would show people is, because I think people know those headlines, but I want to show people some of the actual numbers behind it. So we'll have some pretty slides to look at, although not too pretty because I made them. So pretty crude stuff right out of Excel. So the blue bars are North America, meaning the US and Canada, and the red bars are the box office in China. It's denominated in US dollars and billions, and you can see, there's still a pretty big gap between the two. So at first you might say, well, maybe this isn't such a huge deal. But when we look at the kind of growth numbers and the projection numbers is where things start to be interesting. So this is North America the last 5 years, and you're looking at a compounded annual growth rate of somewhere around under 1%. I think it's 0.7%. So really pretty flat, and you've probably seen some headlines about this year, 2014, maybe even some shrinkage. So directionally, it's great, it's big, it's huge, it's #1 by quite a bit, but it's not going anywhere. By contrast, if you drill down and look at what's happening at the box office in China, it's much more interesting. You're talking about a growth rate over the last 5 years of, I think, 35% compounded annual growth rate, and the projections are just, continuing to grow spectacularly. If you project forward, and these are some numbers from box office, these numbers I think are from PricewaterhouseCoopers. The North America box office numbers are at a 3% growth rate, which might actually be optimistic. And this is China going forward at 15%, which of course is slower than it has been over the last 5 years, and so assuming some sort of slowdown in the rate of growth. However, if you were to continue to grow at 30%, China that is, the picture would look a lot more like this, and then if you flatlined North America, you'd see a crossover, in the next 4 or 5 years. So this is what is kind of getting people talking about this market. What's the gating factor to this growth? It's really screen count. In North America, you have like 40, or at least in the US, I think it's 40,000 screens for 330 million people. And in China today, or last year anyway, they had 20,000 screens, or fewer than 20,000 screens, for a billion more people, like 1.35 billion or whatever the number is. So they've got a lot of screens to build in order to get to the density that we're talking about. They've been building at 4,000 or 5,000 screens a year, which is bigger than the screen counts in some countries, many major countries. But it'll still take some time to get there. But that's really the only gating factor. So what does this mean for filmmakers? I mean, I guess it's great if you're a Chinese filmmaker, but assuming that many people are not, what are your options? As everybody knows, China is a protected market. The government wants to defend its own domestic filmmakers, and so there's a quota system, which we can go into in greater or lesser depth if people are interested. But basically, there's a limit to the number of non-Chinese films that get released, and they're typically. I'm a foreign sales agent, so I do sell non-Chinese movies in China and have had some success there. But it's only going to be a handful of movies per year because there's a preference for the most commercial, the most theatrical, the movies that have the highest box office potential in order to get those quotes, those theatrical quota slots. The other thing to know about the Chinese market is that it's almost entirely a theatrical market. There's no home entertainment really to speak of. There's a little bit of TV money. There's a small amount of advertising-based VOD, but we're really talking, 95% of the value of a film is going to be in the theatrical box office. The thing, so you can sell non-Chinese movies to China. You can also try to co-produce movies in China, and what that means is to have Chinese elements, whether it's money or cast or shooting on location there, so that it qualifies as a Chinese film, and then you are not subject to the same quota limitations as a non-Chinese film. Co-productions are a little bit of a unicorn. People talk about them all the time. They don't really exist. We've not really seen a Chinese movie that is really Chinese that has traveled outside of China and done any business to speak of. People keep trying. We've tried. I've sold Chinese movies from very, very big directors with Hollywood cast that didn't travel. So that's still to be proven out. So that's, those are kind of your two choices, or, make a movie, a Chinese language movie in China for the Chinese market, since this is a fast-growing market. That's sort of like your third option. So all different types of movies work there, obviously, from Transformers 4 to Tiny Times. There's, it's a fast-growing market, so there's all different types of material that can work there. There's talk about additional quota slots for artistic films that may be in the next year or two, but it will take some time to work through. So that's just a kind of a snapshot of what's happening in that particular fast-growing part of the world, and we'll talk more in the Q&A.
Thank you, Rob. So we're going to move from this huge booming Chinese market to Africa, which is also growing and really becoming more vital on the world stage, and we see a lot of talent that are hopefully be crossing over. And to talk to us about the African market and African talent is Tendeka Matatu from Restless Talent Management, based in London. So, Tendeka.
Hi, thanks. No slides today. I'm just going to talk and read a little bit of my presentation. So, allow me to start with just a little bit about myself. I'm half European, half African, Belgian, Zimbabwean to be precise. I live in London currently, where I produce feature films. I've been involved in the business for the last 15 years, producing 10 films over the last 10 years. Most of these films have been South African. I love storytelling, I love cinema, I love collaborating with talented individuals and filmmakers and engaging with their creative visions. My company, my production company, 10 Ton Films, I develop feature films and television. Almost all the projects on my slate have a strong African angle. And I'm passionate about the film business as well. And no matter how hard and pointless and frustrating it is sometimes, I love producing and I love being at the nexus of art and money. I believe that the African film industry at the moment is one of the most exciting places to be at the moment. It's potentially rewarding. A typical workday for me is, having in-depth discussions with a Nigerian screenwriter, brainstorming market releases with my South African distributors. And why am I telling you this? Well, over the past years, I've found myself informally helping fellow filmmakers, mainly Africans, who came seeking my advice on matters relating to their various projects. My experience and my wide perspective was of value to them. Many of them were smart and talented individuals, but I started noticing some red flags and some potentially dangerous patterns. Circumstances were forcing them to wear too many hats. A novice writer would be trying to produce a film that he had written by mortgaging his house. Two actors, were trying to self-distribute a film that they co-wrote. The list goes on. And in most cases, inevitably it'd be disastrous or at best mediocre. And it's not because they were mediocre filmmakers or with average talent, but it's because they were spreading themselves too thinly. Instead of focusing on the things that they were good at, they were working in isolation. Instead of collaborating, they were working on isolation instead of collaborating. They were making bad choices for all the wrong reasons. But even more damaging, what they were doing was they were undermining the value of their own talent. And in my view, they were missing out on a big opportunity. So 8 months ago, together with my co-founder, Marie-Laura Mungai, I decided to set up a management company. And in May this year, we launched Restless Talent Management, the first global talent management company to focus exclusively on African talent. Marie is a French media entrepreneur. She founded and ran a Nairobi-based VOD platform called Boonie TV, which is the leading African VOD platform. We share the same belief that when it comes to the future potential of African film and television industry, there's huge amounts of opportunity. So why Africa? Well, at the moment, there's an ever-increasing focus on Africa. We're witnessing the emergence of world-class talent in business, tech, and of course the arts. In recent times, we've seen actors and directors of African descent grabbing the headlines in Hollywood: Lupita Nyong'o, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Andrew Dusomne, just to name a few. This year's program at TIFF has 7 African titles, exceptional films like Timbuktu, Stories of Our Lives, and Jyoti Mystery's Impunity, which is premiering tonight. So at Restless, we're combining our expertise of the local market and our knowledge of the global film industry with our passion for African cinema. Our mission is to nurture and support the best African writers, directors, and creative producers. Our vision is not just about trying to launch them and launch them into the international stage. It's also about positioning and enabling them to pioneer and redefine creative African content for the African market. And in my view, this is where the big opportunity lies. So maybe we should look at the numbers very quickly. In March 2013, the World Bank identified Africa as the poorest continent in the world. However, it also stated that it was the world's fastest growing continent, 5.6% per year. The GDP of Africa is expected to rise over 6% per year between 2013 and 2023. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, population of 174 million people, and a GDP of $552 billion. South Africa has a GDP of $350 billion and a population of 52 million. And the interesting thing is that there's a burgeoning middle class, increasing amount of disposable income, and it's estimated that in the next 5 years, that middle class will grow to 128 million people. Leading global brands are establishing footholds on the continent, and it's not just like the Heinekens and the Nestlés, but also really high-end consumer brands like Samsung, L'Oreal, Louis Vuitton even. In South Africa, the main markets for film and television are Nigeria and South Africa. The South African industry is worth $350 million. I think last year there were about 85 films produced. Box office takings, roughly $88 million last year. 11% of that was local film. There's an increasing number of pay TV and terrestrial channels across the continent. The main channel is, the main provider is MultiChoice. They offer pay TV, mobile TV, video on demand. They offer hundreds of channels and increasingly more and more local content channels. Currently, they're operating in 50 countries with over 8 million viewers, or households, should I say. And that number is increasing by about 500,000 households per year. There's an estimate 240 million internet users in Africa. VOD is a rapidly growing distribution channel. Platforms like Booni TV, Iroko TV, and AfriNolly are growing their subscriber bases at a big rate. So to put it simply, while these numbers might seem comparatively small to China or to the US, the market is growing. But there is one number that's really big coming out of Africa, and that's the Nigerian film industry. It's estimated to be $51 billion. That's the second biggest industry in the world. And I guess most of you have heard about these straight-to-video, homegrown movies. And yes, the quality and the artistic merit may be dubious at some stages, but the films are always evolving, and they're responding to audience demands. The new wave of Nollywood films have higher budgets, they're more sophisticated, better production values, and more innovative release strategies. So there's a real demand for local content. And at the end of the day, the numbers really don't lie. That number of 51 billion is really big. And it's fueled a real demand for local content. And so when it comes to financing that content, how do producers go about it? So African producers have to hustle just like producers everywhere else in the world. But we don't have any subsidies or government institutions that fund. There's few and far between tax rebates, South Africa being the exception, which has fueled the local film industry. There's also, soft funds from the first world, but the competition for those is huge, and often our visions aren't entirely aligned. So increasingly, African producers are sourcing their finance from far more commercial routes through branded content and product placement. Big corporates who are understanding that the power of creative content helps them reach a wider market, through wealthy individuals who are willing to put up take high-risk stakes in the industry, through television, the occasional pre-buys. Broadcasters like MultiChoice are investing more and more in Nigerian, South African, and East African content. And international brands like FX, Canal Plus, and Disney Channel are not far behind. Then there's forward-thinking distribution companies like Coast West and Times Media Films that are beginning to understand the long-term value in acquiring content early. They've started putting up MGs. And believe it or not, even some of the VOD platforms I mentioned earlier are putting up MGs or pre-buying. All of these sources of finance have a common understanding. The understanding that what the market is now and what the market can be in 10 years' time. And they also understand that to maintain their commercially competitive edge in that market, they need high-quality, sophisticated, homegrown content. And the money's not big, and the budgets are small, and it's not easy money. Those financiers are pushing really hard deals. Very often we see producers giving up the majority, if not all of their rights, just to get their content financed. But at Restless, we believe that talent is going to play an increasingly more crucial role in attracting the finance. If the broadcasters and the corporate sponsors and the distributors want to secure commercially viable content, then they will have to start forming long-term, strong and meaningful relationships with the creative talent. So, even at this stage, we're looking at, there's certain talents in Nigeria that are considered bankable. Actors like Osi Okeje, Genevieve Nanji, Mercy Johnson. They've got huge fan bases and audience loyalty. So our purpose is to promote and nurture the loyalty for our talent within the market. We can grow their value and build their careers. We're working with African producers to package their projects smartly and to help them leverage the value of their talent, finding innovative ways and helping them to secure better deals on more equitable terms. So in conclusion, we believe that backing the African content for the African market is a potentially rewarding business model. But key to that success is understanding that the high quality, authenticity, and creative talent are fundamental to the market. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we're going to have Dan Schoenbrunn from Kickstarter, who's going to talk a little bit about one specific case of a foreign film using Kickstarter to fund its North American release, its P&A there, and maybe tell us a little bit more about Kickstarter globally and how filmmakers can tap into it. So, Dan.
Thanks a lot. Okay, I'm a big fan of the movie Creepshow. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but that's what this is reminding me of. And I am the third and hopefully craziest presentation. My name is Dan Schoenbrunn. You could see me there. That is one of, I think, 3 times in my life that I've worn a suit when that photo was taken. Kickstarter is based in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, so that plays into that. I've actually just come on board at Kickstarter previously. I was at IFP, which, if you don't know, the Independent Filmmaker Project. They are the oldest and largest nonprofit support organizations for independent filmmakers in the US. Really working with emerging young filmmakers, coaching them along and mentoring them from one stage of production into the world, which is what we're going to talk about today. Funding for theatrical releases for foreign and niche films, which, as I think a lot of you guys know, can be very difficult. If you're not Michael Haneke, it could be hard to, and very costly to book theatrically in New York and LA, let alone anywhere else in the US. And just very briefly, here's why. Four-walling costs, meaning for a week run, opening on a Friday, closing on a Thursday, if you're not booked by a distributor, you as the filmmaker or the distributor will end up incurring these costs. It can be around $13,000, and obviously that's nothing next to P&A. And if you don't have a built-in audience in New York, a lot of filmmakers will bring somebody on to actually get butts and seats in the theater. So all of this can, obviously, the price tag can rise. You know, and I found this during my time at IFP, especially to be the case for foreign films that don't have named talent, or niche films that maybe appeal to some specific market but don't have a wide enough network to justify getting booked theatrically. And you know, I think for a lot of these types of films, even some distributors are focusing more on digital platforms and VOD, and really treating the festival run as the only case where these films can actually be screened theatrically, which is kind of a bummer because theatrical is obviously really important. It's still the only way to get a New York Times review, which for a lot of filmmakers is the golden ticket, especially if it's a good review. That can be useful not only for this film's publicity, but for your career, getting your next film financed, etc. And you know, theatrical, I think, is evolving in the way that filmmakers are using it to connect with an audience in an age where we're watching films on our computer screens or on our smartphones. To be able to sit in a theater with an audience and maybe even the filmmaker there and interact with them is a really special thing. I've worked with a lot of filmmakers who are kind of rethinking this and trying to make this more of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. My favorite recent examples was a film that we worked with at IFP called Go Down Death, where every night at midnight they did Smell-O-Vision. Another example that I really love is the Pulp documentary. When it screened recently in New York, Jarvis Cocker, the lead singer of Pulp, came and hosted a karaoke contest where he listened to people sing his songs and awarded the top prize to a 10-year-old kid singing This Is Hardcore, so I recommend that YouTube video very much. You know, I think just in a wider sense, though, so many filmmakers grew up watching movies on the big screen. It's really a special thing for them to get to have their art displayed in this environment. So now I want to talk very briefly about Kickstarter as a place to raise these funds, and not only raise funds, but make it relevant again. So how many people here are familiar with Kickstarter? Oh, love it. How many people have created a Kickstarter project? Excellent. So I am going to, and I promise I'll be very brief, just some background for those of you guys who aren't totally familiar with our model. You know, we're a place for creative projects. And I think that's key to our success, is that we're really exclusively a place for artists to come together and share work, whether that's films or video games, building robots, making food, making potato salad. Here are our rules. You know, it's really, like I said, a platform for creative works. It's a place to be honest and transparent with the people who are going to help you create this. And it's not for charity. You know, there are plenty of great places online to raise money for charity, but Kickstarter is really a place for creativity. Our all-or-nothing model is kind of the key point to actually fundraising on the site. You can see here this project is near its goal, and it will definitely reach its goal because we've seen a lot of momentum. But if this campaign ended here, they would not get any money. So it's all or nothing. You set your goal, and once you hit your goal, you get the money. You can go over your goal, but you do need to hit it. And the reason why we do that is it's less risk. Let's say you want to four-wall a theater and you need $13,000 to do it. $4,000 isn't going to get you very far. But it also encourages participation. You kind of have this rallying cry. And most importantly, it works. We've seen that you know, only 44% of projects on the site are successfully funded. But of that, and this is maybe my favorite stat, 80% of the projects that reach only 20% of their goal end up successfully funding. And because of that, almost 90% of the money that's being pledged on the site is going towards funded projects. I won't bore you guys by reading these numbers, but I think they're quite impressive. I especially like the $1.29 billion pledged, which I forgot to put the B in at first, and that would have been a lot less impressive. But important here, I think, is that this money isn't, we've had a lot of high-profile creators on the site, like Spike Lee. This money isn't coming from people who are just coming in to donate to one project. 62% of the money on the site is coming from people donating to multiple projects. Talking about film specifically, here are some more numbers that I will not bore you with, but film is the second biggest category on the site, and obviously is a big part of what people are excited about with Kickstarter. Here at TIFF, we actually launched in Canada here last year, so this is our 1-year anniversary in Canada. But here at the festival this year, we have 3 films that launched on the platform: David Thorpe's Do I Sound Gay?, How Hartley's Ned Rifle, and The Yes Men Are Revolting by The Yes Men. And all of those films raised over 100K on Kickstarter. So it's really something that the bigger films are embracing. Here are some of our other recent successes. I'm sure you guys are aware of some of these projects, but it's not just a place for the Veronica Marses and Spike Lees of the world. Great festival favorites like Blue Ruin, Ira Sachs are turning to the platform. The Square is a film that raised theatrical funds on Kickstarter, which brings us to our case study, which will be brief. But it's of a film called Boy, a New Zealand film by a director named Taika Waititi. And has anyone seen this film? It's a really charming coming-of-age tale. It's actually quite a successful film. It is New Zealand's highest-grossing film of all time, even more than Whale Rider. An Oscar-nominated director. He was nominated for his previous short. And it's a film with you would think, a built-in American audience. It premiered at Sundance. He is a director for Flight of the Conchords and is kind of in this comedy community. And yet there was no traditional theatrical distribution model that presented itself to him that he thought was worthy of the film. So he took it to Kickstarter. I won't go into too much detail about the campaign itself, but I'd really encourage you guys to go on there and watch some videos and enjoy it, because the key thing to me is that the humor of the film and the charm of the film, he really brought to the campaign and really united his backers around. I think he started by targeting New Zealand audiences, but then used that to build momentum to reach an American audience. In the end, he reached 1,800 backers, raised 110K, and I think most importantly, the momentum from this campaign helped him to bring a great team on board. He worked with some of the top publicists, but also great companies like Bond, who are rethinking what theatrical can be. We have some videos here that we have no sound for, and I won't do my New Zealand accent and dub him in. But these are his project updates, which I assure you are quite funny, and you should watch them. But basically, he's engaging an audience through Kickstarter, not just as a rallying cry to make money, but as a rallying cry to get them excited about the film. These are connections that he will be able to sustain as he brings it out into the world, but these are also connections. He's kind of becoming an auteur on more than just the screen. He is unifying people around him for his next project. So there he is. We won't watch it. This is another funny video, I swear. They opened after this Kickstarter campaign. They were a New York Times critic pick. They went on to screen in over 15 different cities, including Honolulu, had quite a successful run. There he is again. I think that what's really important here, that it's about a lot more than purely fundraising. This is about a way to make theatrical relevant and exciting again. That kind of communal vibe that you create with your audience in that theatrical setting, we're actually extending outwards online, and it's something that just gives a transparency, engagement, and really helps you to sustain a connection with your audience, which is what Kickstarter is all about. Cool, thanks guys.
Thanks, Dan, and maybe you can do your New Zealand accent as part of the Q&A portion.
After a couple of drinks, maybe.
Okay, it's too early in the day.
I
was just going to ask one question and then definitely open it up, so please get your questions ready on the tip of your tongues. I guess I wanted to ask, especially Rob and Thandeka, how do you find the right partner if you're working abroad or if you're trying to do a co-production? Especially, if you're an independent Canadian producer, let's say, you don't just hop a plane to Beijing and hope to find somebody. How do you connect with the right people?
That's a very relevant question. One thing, I think I forgot to introduce myself and like my company, so let me give you like a 10 seconds about that. I work for a company called Film Nation Entertainment. We are an international sales agent. We're also a production company ourselves. So I often represent independent producers' films that I'm not the producer of, but I'm just the sales agent. And so, but yes, we are also a production company. So we actually have a project that we think would be a great project to make with a partner in China as a Chinese language film, which we don't have those Chinese language skills ourselves. So it is a tricky question as to how do you find a partner? I don't know the right answer. I do have the advantage of working with local distributors all the time to whom I sell films, and so I have a relationship over time because they've taken our films and they've released them. But in terms of a production partner and shepherding that through, we're taking a step into the unknown.
And that's even from a fairly large,
that's from a
very
well-established
company
yeah. with a lot of connections. I think because China has been a closed market, the rules are opaque certainly about what qualifies as a production. They're not sort of really written clearly. I think on purpose they want to have some control over that. There's a lot of unknowns. I think it's less in other places in the world. We've worked with filmmakers in Australia and in Spain and other parts of the world that I'm not thinking of right now. But I think China's a unique case in some ways.
Okay. And Tendeka, especially if say you've got an African immigrant story in Canada you want to tell, and you think, well, gosh, this multi-billion-dollar Nigerian film industry should give me some money. Can somebody do that from here? Can you just go tap into that?
Yeah, and I don't think it's not that straightforward. I mean, I think as with any partnership that you go into, you've got to do your homework to find out who's doing what on the continent, who's active, who are the people that are at festivals like TIFF. Nigeria is very difficult. South Africa is slightly easier to partner with. Nigeria is very difficult just because they have their very own unique way of doing business. Which is quite brash and which is quite forward and which is for some people a little bit kind of difficult to get a handle on. But ultimately, it's about talking to people. It's about really doing your homework and discovering who's out there and what they're doing. But yes, there is the potential to partner, absolutely.
Okay. And Dan, I just wanted to ask you one quick one before I open it. It's just I see that it's amazing that Taika Waititi had got this groundswell of support behind him, but do you think people raising P&A for sort of a typical film that's maybe not got a household name, not a track record, is that realistic for more films?
It's something that I worked on a lot at my previous gig at IFP, was releasing kind of niche titles, and I do believe that every film has a niche. And it might not be readily apparent. It's easier with documentaries, and we've really seen a lot of documentaries get great support on Kickstarter when there's a social interest tie-in or a musician. But one example that I always give is a film that we opened called Sakanaga. We opened this theatrically. It premiered at the Boston Independent Film Festival. No name cast. It's called Sakanaga, which is the name of a town in Georgia, and it is a very low concept story. But the filmmaker was just such a generous, outgoing, extroverted person, and really had, there are certain filmmakers that just have a passion for this kind of how to connect with their audience in a fun, engaging, interesting way. And what he really latched onto there was just the setting of the film. It was set in this town in Georgia. He opened it in Brooklyn. He found all of the local bars that had kind of meetups for Georgia expats living in Brooklyn. He hosted Georgia Trivia Night, where the winner got a drink. And he was able to really he found his grassroots tie-in. And I think that, again, there are certain filmmakers who really just kind of have that in them, but it goes back to why we make these movies, which is to connect our stories with audiences. So just think about who would be excited to be a part of your story, whatever that story is, and where you can find them.
Good advice. So I think I'm sure some people have questions out there. We've got 3 different areas, 3 different experts. Do we have a microphone? It's a gentleman sitting in the green shirt on the aisle, and then I think secondly on the corner, and then in the middle there.
Your talk about Kickstarter is very inspiring to independent filmmakers. Since you've only been in Canada for a year, a lot of other sites have come up to compete with Kickstarter. I've done a couple of Indiegogo campaigns, and they, of course, don't have the all or nothing model. Can you talk about why Kickstarter is better? You know, because now filmmakers have so many of these crowdfunding sites to go to, and frankly, I'm kind of trying to figure out which one is the right one to use.
You know, I could answer this question
Did you
for a long
plant him
time.
in the audience to ask?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
I don't like to do the comparative thing, and again, I am just starting out over there, but a big part of, I think, my job is going to be less being reactive to the other sites out there and more about making Kickstarter the best and most useful platform that it can be to filmmakers and creative people, which I think it is. First of all, it's by far the largest, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that Googling Kickstarter, that happens more than the word crowdfunding, more than the word Indiegogo combined. We have more than double the impressions every month on our site. I think people talk about Kickstarter like they talk about Kleenex. You know, Kleenex is tissues. And I think that's because people are really inspired by our creative vision, which I think is mainly what distinguishes us from other sites. This is a place to rally your audience specifically for a creative project. It's not a site where you're next to someone raising money for cancer research, which is incredible, but it's a site really where artists are going to discover other artists, and I think that's maybe the final thing that distinguishes the site, is that it's really become a place for discovery. People, you know, in my previous job, I was scouting projects, and the first place I would go is Kickstarter because I knew that that's where exciting projects were coming. So I'm learning the stats, and I could blather them out at you, but I hope that helps.
Okay. We had another question. Yep, the guy standing up. She's bringing a mic right now. Thanks.
Hey, how's it going? My question is also about Kickstarter. Sorry, I feel bad. I'm attacking. Everyone's against you. But my question is simply, you have to create a product. Would, say, a script be a product, or does it need to be a finished film?
No, it's really for any stage. I would say you should go in with a game plan. Part of the all or nothing funding is that you're choosing a goal that will get you to something. So I wouldn't just go in with kind of a script and no plan to move that script along to the next stage, because it is all about transparency, and it's all about kind of having an honest dialogue with the people who are supporting you about when this film is going to be delivered. So I would definitely say be financing with a purpose, but I'd say most common on the site are people coming to raise funds for production, further development. And I think the other important thing to point out is that it can be a piece of that. Kickstarter does not have to be a place where like you're holistically raising your entire budget for your film, or even your entire budget to release theatrically. It's as much about community building and about getting the project out there publicly as it is getting your entire budget.
But so if you're providing the script to the audience who have helped you fundraise for an A-list talent script, that would be acceptable and wouldn't be removed from the site?
No.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, is the guy in the middle there, or guy in the middle, and then one last one with the lady up front.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tamim Tiane from South Africa. I'd like to pose a question to Thandeka. First, to jog his memory, I would say to him, why Tony, not me?
Sorry, what was that?
Just to jog your memory.
Oh,
you don't have
yes.
to respond to that. Why Tony, not me?
I've got you.
Yes.
He's talking about a film I just released. He wanted to be the lead actor in it.
Yeah, as an imaging producer, and seeing that you understand the African industry, to put together my package to perhaps solicit a co-production, international co-production and finance for my film. What makes you tick in terms of me getting my package together to to get co-producers and finance for the film.
So I think, so your question was about what you need to do to get your package together in order to attract it to co-producers.
Yes.
And finance both on the continent and beyond. So I mean, first and foremost, I think it's the story and the potential of that story in the marketplace. Is it a story that has legs if you're going to try and fund it commercially and try to attract some of the money that I was talking about? Then you need to be looking at it from a commercial perspective, and you need to be packaging up in commercial perspective, who the actors are, who's the director. You know, if the imperative is, or if the intent is not necessarily commercial, then there are other avenues. I don't know, is Kickstarter in Africa yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I think, you know, there's potential probably for, I would say there's potential for Kickstarter to be looking in Africa, or possibly there's similar models. But if you're looking at putting together a commercially viable project, then you really need to do your homework as to what the market is looking at and what the financiers, what kind of projects they're looking for as well.
Okay, I think we have time for one very quick question. The lady in the black and red there.
Hi, this is a question for Kickstarter.
My name is Dan.
Hi, Dan. Okay, so there are many projects that are advertised on Kickstarter. So how do you make sure, even though if you have a good portfolio, that you have a funding of, say, 100,000, how do you ensure that you would get that with the number of heads and people?
It's a great question, and I'd say the best advice I can give is to ask us. Somewhere in the audience is one of my colleagues, Liz, who we have an incredible staff of like knowledgeable people who've been working in film for a long time, who are happy to, you can submit your project for feedback, and they're happy to give you feedback and talk to you. I mean, one baseline stat that I would throw out is that the average pledge on Kickstarter is about $70. So think about that, and then think about your reach. Think about who your audience could be, whether that's friends, family, or fans that you can reach through some kind of grassroots outreach. Be realistic. Don't set your goal too high, but also don't set your goal too low. You know, part of the joy of the platform is that rallying cry around the all or nothing model. But talk to us, and you know, just look honestly at yourself, and honestly also think about what you need. You know, don't set your goal at 200K just for the sake of it. Think about, like, definitely budget it out and have a plan.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're out of time, but I think lightning is struck. Thank you to the lightning talkers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. I just have a couple of announcements. If everyone can just give the speakers a chance to clear the stage, please. Sorry about that. I have a couple of housekeeping announcements. We do have some schedule updates, so if you guys could just keep an eye. So after lunch, what will be happening here, there is a Mavericks program at 2 p.m. that's starting. This is not an industry session. You will need a ticket to attend this event, so I just want the audience here to know that you won't be able to access this with your delegate badges. It's not an industry event at all. So if you could please just follow the instructions of our venue staff when you're returning in the afternoon, we'd really appreciate it. We also have our industry programming for the afternoon will be taking place in the Vimeo Industry Convergence Center. That is actually just the room that is across the hall from here. So when you enter where the white desk is and you go up the stairs, that's where the session is going to be taking place in the afternoon. And so that starts at 2. We are expecting a full house, but we do have an overflow screen in place for you. So there's another room in the Vimeo Industry Convergence Center where if you can't get into the physical panel space, we do have a screen with a live feed happening in there as well. And then the other quick announcement, I'm just going to ask for the, if the audience can help me with this, because many of our speakers do have other things to attend to immediately after. They really do have very tight schedules. So what I'm going to do is, where possible, we'll try to institute an extended Q&A, if the panel can allow to have a couple more minutes for you to speak with them. But other than that, if I can just ask for you to meet them in the lobby afterwards. Some of them who do not have a tight schedule will be able to go straight into the lobby. So those are my housekeeping. Thank you, and have a great lunch, and I'll see you guys in the afternoon.